Welcome back to True North Political Pulse. Today, we're diving deep into the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, one of the most important documents in Canada. It defines our fundamental rights, legal protections, and the limits of government power. Yet, despite its importance, many aspects of the Charter, especially Section 1, are misunderstood. We'll be covering every part of the Charter in this video, culminating in a detailed look at Section 1 and how the Oakes test determines when and how rights can be limited. Before we begin breaking down each section, it's crucial to understand that the Charter is part of the Constitution, but it is not the entire Constitution. The Constitution also covers things like how the government is structured and how powers are divided between the federal government and the provinces. The Charter specifically focuses on protecting the rights and freedoms of individuals. The Charter didn't just materialize out of thin air. Its inclusion in the 1982 Constitution Act was a contentious process, and not everyone was on board. In fact, Quebec never officially signed the 1982 Patriation Package, though the Charter applies throughout the country, including in Quebec. This process was part of Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau's effort to bring the Constitution fully under Canadian control, and the Charter was seen as a way to guarantee the rights of all Canadians in a clear, codified way. Now that we've established some background, let's talk about a key distinction in the Charter: fundamental rights and legal rights, and why they're spelled out separately. The Charter distinguishes between fundamental rights and legal rights, and this distinction is critical. Fundamental rights are broad, foundational freedoms that ensure Canadians can participate in public life and express themselves freely. These include rights related to freedom of expression, religion, assembly, and association. In short, they protect the ability to live according to one's beliefs and to engage with society without fear of interference from the state. Legal rights, on the other hand, are more specific. They focus on protecting individuals when they interact with the legal system, ensuring fair treatment when a person is arrested, detained, or put on trial. While fundamental rights allow us to function freely in society, legal rights ensure that we are treated fairly if our actions bring us into contact with law enforcement or the courts. By spelling these out separately, the Charter provides a dual layer of protection: one for everyday freedoms and one for situations where the power of the state might infringe on individual liberty. Section 2. Fundamental Freedoms. Section 2 is where we find the core freedoms that form the basis of our rights as citizens in a democratic society. Freedom of conscience and religion. Canadians are free to practice, or not practice, any religion. Whether you're attending a church, mosque, synagogue, or choosing no religion at all, this freedom ensures you can live according to your beliefs without interference from the state. Freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression. This covers everything from political debates to art, journalism, and even casual conversations. You can share your opinions, whether it's on a social media post or in a public forum. Of course, there are limits to this freedom. Hate speech, for instance, is restricted, as we'll discuss later when we get to Section 1. Freedom of peaceful assembly. Think of any peaceful protest you've seen in Canada, whether for climate action, labor rights, or Indigenous rights. This freedom ensures that people can gather together and voice their concerns, provided they do so peacefully. Freedom of association. Whether you're joining a union, a political party, or even just a local club, this freedom protects your right to form and join groups. This is vital in a democratic society where collective action can lead to real change. Sections 3-5. Democratic rights. Sections 3 through 5 outline the rights that protect our ability to participate in Canada's democracy. Section 3 guarantees the right to vote in federal and provincial elections. Every Canadian citizen has the right to vote for their government representatives, ensuring that we have a say in how our country is run. Section 4 limits the term of any government to 5 years. Governments cannot rule indefinitely without facing an election. The only exception to this is in cases of war or national emergency, which requires strict legal justification. Section 5 mandates that Parliament and provincial legislatures must meet at least once every year. This ensures that governments remain accountable and cannot simply avoid scrutiny by not calling legislative sessions. Section 6. Mobility rights. Section 6 provides the right for Canadians to move freely within the country and beyond its borders. You have the right to live and work in any province or territory in Canada. Whether you want to move from Ontario to Alberta for work or from Nova Scotia to British Columbia for lifestyle reasons, Section 6 ensures no provincial law can prevent that. Section 6 also protects your right to leave and return to Canada. If you travel abroad, this section guarantees that you can return home freely. Sections 7 to 14, Legal Rights. These sections protect individuals in their interactions with the justice system and are critical in maintaining fairness and justice in Canada. Section 7 guarantees the right to life, liberty, and security of the person. This broad protection covers everything from arbitrary detention to the right to make decisions about your own body, as seen in cases involving medical assistance in dying. Section 8 protects against unreasonable search and seizure. If police want to search your home or property, they need a valid reason and typically a warrant. Section 9 prevents arbitrary detention or imprisonment. Law enforcement cannot detain you without cause. Section 10 ensures that if you are arrested or detained, you have the right to be informed of the reasons for your arrest and the right to speak to legal counsel. Sections 11 to 14. These sections further protect the rights of individuals in legal proceedings. They cover the presumption of innocence, the right to a fair and public trial, and protection against cruel or unusual punishment. These rights create a system where individuals are protected from abuses of state power and are treated fairly if they are accused of a crime. Section 15. Equality Rights. Section 15 guarantees equality before and under the law. No one can be discriminated against based on race, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, sex, age, or disability. This section has been key in advancing equality in Canadian society, including protections for same-sex marriage and gender equality. For example, legal cases invoking Section 15 have ensured that discrimination based on sexual orientation is prohibited, and that people with disabilities have the same access to services as others. Sections 16 to 23, Language Rights. These sections protect the language rights of Canadians, particularly around the use of English and French. And Sections 16 to 20 ensure that both English and French are the official languages of Canada, and that federal institutions provide services in both languages. For example, if you're in Ottawa or any other federal government office, you have the right to receive services in either French or English. Sections 21 to 23 focus on education rights, ensuring that minority language education is available where numbers warrant. If you live in a province where your first language is a minority, these sections protect your right to have your children educated in that language. Sections 24-34, General Provisions. These sections include various general provisions, but the most important is Section 24, which allows individuals to go to court if they believe their charter rights have been violated. This is what gives the Charter its teeth. It's not just a symbolic document. If your rights are infringed, you can challenge the government or other authorities in court. Section 1, the Reasonable Limits Clause. Now, let's talk about Section 1, which may be the most misunderstood part of the Charter. Section 1 says that the rights and freedoms guaranteed by the Charter are subject to reasonable limits prescribed by law, as can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. In simple terms, this means that no right is absolute. There can be limits, but they must be justified. For example, you have the right to free expression, but that doesn't mean you can incite violence or spread hate. The government can place limits on your expression, but it must justify those limits under Section 1, the Oakes Test, a balancing act. To determine whether a law that limits a charter right is justified, courts use the Oakes Test, which comes from a 1986 Supreme Court case. The Oakes Test has 3 key steps. There must be a pressing and substantial objective. The government must show that its law addresses a serious issue that justifies limiting a right. Proportionality. The law must be proportionate, meaning it cannot go further than necessary to achieve its goal. This includes 3 subtests. Rational connection. The law must logically be connected to its objective. A minimal impairment. The law must impair the right as little as possible. Proportionate effects. The benefits of the law must outweigh the negative effects of limiting the right. For example, Canada's hate speech laws limit freedom of expression, but are upheld because they serve a pressing objective, protecting vulnerable groups, and they do so in a way that minimally impairs the right. The Charter of Rights and Freedoms is a living document that reflects the values of Canadian society. It protects our core freedoms and legal rights, while recognizing that those rights must sometimes be limited for the greater good. Section 1 and the Oakes Test ensure that when rights are limited, it's done carefully and only when absolutely necessary. With all of this said, what is important to understand about the Charter is that it only protects you from actions by the government and the courts. It does not shield you from the consequences of your own actions in the private sphere. This is a crucial distinction that often gets misunderstood. For example, freedom of expression protects you from being silenced by the government. If you criticize the government or express unpopular opinions, the Charter ensures that the government cannot penalize you for your views. However, this doesn't mean you are immune to social consequences. If you post something controversial on social media, your employer could take action against you if it violates company policy, and people in your social circles might react negatively. The Charter won't stop private individuals or organizations from responding to what you say. Another example is freedom of assembly. You have the right to join a protest, and the government cannot unjustly stop you from doing so. But if your participation leads to actions like blocking traffic or causing disruptions, the police may still intervene, and you may face legal consequences if laws are broken. The Charter protects your right to protest, but not from the consequences of illegal actions taken during that protest. In essence, the Charter prevents the government from infringing on your rights, but it doesn't give you a free pass from accountability or the consequences of how you exercise those rights in everyday life. Thanks for watching True North Political Pulse. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more content on Canadian politics and law. Let me know in the comments which section of the Charter you think is the most important and why.